The Siege of Veracruz stands as one of the most significant military engagements of the 19th century, not only for its immediate impact on the Mexican-American War, but also for its lasting influence on military strategy and international relations. In the spring of 1847, the United States launched an ambitious amphibious assault on the fortified port city of Veracruz, a key stronghold on Mexico's Gulf Coast. This operation, the first of its kind in U.S. history, showcased the growing capabilities of the American military and set the stage for the eventual U.S. victory in the war. Veracruz was more than just a strategic target. It was a symbol of Mexican sovereignty and a vital economic hub. Its capture would provide the United States with a critical base of operations for advancing inland toward Mexico City, the heart of the Mexican government. For Mexico, the loss of Veracruz was a devastating blow, both militarily and psychologically, as it exposed the vulnerabilities of the nation's defenses and underscored the challenges of resisting a determined and technologically superior adversary. The siege itself was a brutal and hard-fought affair, marked by intense artillery bombardments, fierce resistance from Mexican forces, and significant civilian suffering. Over the course of 3 weeks, the city endured relentless shelling, culminating in its surrender on March 29, 1847. The fall of Veracruz not only demonstrated the effectiveness of combined naval and land operations but also highlighted the human cost of war, as thousands of soldiers and civilians alike paid the ultimate price. This article explores the Siege of Veracruz in detail, examining its historical context, the events that unfolded during the siege, and its far-reaching consequences. By delving into the strategies, tactics, and personal stories of those involved, we gain a deeper understanding of this pivotal moment in history and its enduring legacy. If you'd like, I can expand on any of the sections or provide additional details to help you develop the full article. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. Complete certainly. Writing a 100,000-word article is a massive undertaking, and while I can't provide the full text in one response due to space constraints, I can continue to expand on the outline and provide detailed sections. Below, I will expand on the historical context section to give you a sense of how the article could develop. If you'd like, I can continue with subsequent sections in future responses. Point 1. Historical context: the Mexican-American War. Causes and origins: the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, was a conflict rooted in the expansionist ambitions of the United States and the territorial disputes between the two nations. The war was fueled by the concept of manifest destiny, the belief that the United States was destined to expand across the North American continent. This ideology drove U.S. policymakers to seek control over vast territories, including Texas, California, and the lands in between. The immediate cause of the war was the annexation of Texas by the United States in 1845. Texas had declared independence from Mexico in 1836 following the Texas Revolution, but Mexico never recognized its sovereignty. The U.S. annexation of Texas was seen as an act of aggression by Mexico, leading to diplomatic tensions and, ultimately, armed conflict. In addition to Texas, the United States sought to acquire other Mexican territories, including California and New Mexico. These regions were sparsely populated but rich in resources, making them attractive targets for American expansion. The U.S. government attempted to purchase these territories from Mexico, but the offers were rejected, further escalating tensions. Geopolitical importance of Veracruz, located on Mexico's Gulf Coast, was one of the most important ports in the country. Its strategic location made it a vital hub for trade and military operations. Control of Veracruz would allow the United States to establish a secure base of operations for advancing inland toward Mexico City, the capital of Mexico and the center of its government. The city was also home to the fortress of San Juan de Ulúa, a formidable stronghold that guarded the harbor. San Juan de Ulúa had a long history of defending Veracruz from foreign invasions, and its capture was essential for any force seeking to control the city. The fortress was equipped with heavy artillery and manned by experienced troops, making it a challenging target for any attacker. Expansionist policies. The U.S. government's expansionist policies were a key driver of the Mexican-American War. President James K. Polk, a staunch believer in manifest destiny, was determined to expand the nation's borders. Polk's administration sought to acquire California and New Mexico through negotiation, but when diplomatic efforts failed, he turned to military force. Polk's strategy involved a two-pronged approach. One force would advance into northern Mexico from Texas, while another would launch an amphibious assault on Veracruz. The capture of Veracruz would provide the United States with a strategic foothold on Mexico's eastern coast, enabling a direct advance on Mexico City. Mexican defenses. Mexico, on the other hand, was ill-prepared for a large-scale conflict with the United States. The country was politically unstable, with frequent changes in leadership and a weak central government. The Mexican military was underfunded and poorly equipped, and its troops were often poorly trained and demoralized. Despite these challenges, Mexico made efforts to fortify Veracruz and prepare for a potential attack. The fortress of San Juan de Ulúa was reinforced, and additional troops were stationed in the city. However, these preparations were insufficient to withstand the overwhelming force that the United States would bring to bear. Diplomatic efforts. In the months leading up to the war, both the United States and Mexico engaged in diplomatic efforts to resolve their differences. The U.S. government offered to purchase California and New Mexico, but Mexico refused to cede any territory. Negotiations broke down, and the two nations moved closer to war. The Slidell Mission, an attempt by the United States to negotiate a settlement, ended in failure when the Mexican government refused to meet with U.S. envoy John Slidell. This diplomatic snub further inflamed tensions and convinced President Polk that military action was necessary. Point 2. Prelude to the Siege of Military preparations. The United States began planning for the invasion of Veracruz in late 1846. The operation would be the first large-scale amphibious assault in U.S. history, requiring careful coordination between the Army and Navy. General Winfield Scott, one of the most experienced officers in the U.S. military, was chosen to lead the expedition. Scott's plan called for a landing at Colado Beach, located just south of Veracruz. The beach was chosen for its relatively flat terrain and proximity to the city. Once ashore, U.S. forces would establish a perimeter and begin the Siege of Veracruz. The U.S. Navy played a crucial role in the operation, providing transport for troops and supplies and supporting the landing with naval gunfire. The fleet, commanded by Commodore Matthew C. Perry, included warships armed with heavy artillery capable of bombarding Mexican defenses. Mexican preparations. Mexican forces in Veracruz were commanded by General Juan Morales, who recognized the importance of defending the city. Morales ordered the reinforcement of San Juan de Ulua and the construction of additional fortifications around the city. However, the Mexican military was hampered by a lack of resources and manpower. Morales also faced challenges in maintaining the morale of his troops. Many Mexican soldiers were conscripts with little training or experience, and they were ill-equipped to face the well-trained and well-armed U.S. forces. Despite these difficulties, Morales was determined to defend Veracruz to the best of his ability. The landing at Collado Beach on March 9, 1847, U.S. forces began their landing at Collado Beach. The operation was executed with precision, thanks to the careful planning of General Scott and the coordination between the Army and Navy. Despite some initial resistance from Mexican forces, the landing was largely successful, and U.S. troops quickly established a beachhead. The landing marked the beginning of the Siege of Veracruz, a campaign that would test the resolve and capabilities of both sides. Over the next 3 weeks, U.S. forces would lay siege to the city, bombarding it with artillery and tightening their grip on its defenses. The Siege of Veracruz, March 9 to 29, 1847, was a pivotal moment in the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. General Winfield Scott's successful capture of the Mexican port city of Veracruz was a strategic triumph that laid the groundwork for the subsequent American advance into the Mexican interior. This article delves into the main strategies employed by Scott during this critical campaign, highlighting his meticulous planning, innovative use of combined arms, and effective leadership. Background and context: the Mexican-American War erupted due to ongoing territorial disputes, particularly over Texas, which had declared independence from Mexico in 1836 and was annexed by the United States in 1845. Tensions escalated, leading to hostilities along the Texas-Mexico border. General Zachary Taylor's initial successes in northern Mexico did not bring about a decisive end to the conflict, prompting President James K. Polk to authorize a second front led by General Winfield Scott. Strategic importance of Veracruz. Veracruz was a crucial seaport and a gateway to the interior of Mexico. Its capture would provide the Americans with a logistical base, deny Mexico access to vital maritime supply routes, and facilitate further advances into the country. The city was heavily fortified, with key defensive positions including Fort Santiago, Fort Concepcion, and the formidable San Juan de Ulua. Winfield Scott's strategic approach, amphibious landing and initial deployment. Scott assembled an army of approximately 12,000 troops, including regular infantry, artillery units, and Marines. He chose to land his forces at Collado Beach, a few miles south of Veracruz, to avoid direct engagement with the heavily fortified positions. The landing, which began on March 9, 1847, was the largest U.S. amphibious operation until World War II. Despite initial delays due to a storm, the landing was executed efficiently, with no casualties. Naval blockade and bombardment. Scott's strategy involved a combined arms approach, integrating naval and ground forces. The U.S. Navy established a blockade of Veracruz, preventing Mexican reinforcements and supplies from reaching the city. Naval ships, including steamships armed with heavy artillery, bombarded the city's fortifications, weakening Mexican defenses. This naval support was crucial in softening the city's defenses before the ground assault, encirclement, and siege tactics. Once the landing was complete, Scott's forces encircled Veracruz, establishing a perimeter that cut off the Mexican defenders from potential escape routes or reinforcements. American engineers and sappers played a vital role in constructing artillery batteries and trenches, systematically weakening the city's defenses. The siege operations were meticulously planned, with artillery positions carefully selected to maximize damage to the city walls and fortifications. Coordinated assault and breaching of defenses. On March 22, 1847, Scott launched a coordinated assault on Veracruz, targeting key defensive positions. American artillery, supported by naval gunfire, inflicted heavy casualties on the Mexican defenders and created breaches in the city walls. The assault was well coordinated, with infantry and artillery working in tandem to exploit weaknesses in the Mexican defenses. Negotiations and surrender. Faced with overwhelming American firepower and the imminent threat of a full-scale assault, Mexican General Juan Morales agreed to surrender Veracruz on March 29, 1847. The city's garrison of approximately 3,360 soldiers, along with military supplies and equipment, fell into American hands. Scott's insistence on unconditional surrender underscored his determination and strategic acumen. Aftermath and consequences. The capture of Veracruz was a significant military victory for the United States, demonstrating the effectiveness of combined arms operations and siege warfare. The fall of Veracruz weakened Mexican morale and contributed to internal divisions within Mexico over how to continue the war. With Veracruz secured, Scott's army proceeded to march westward towards Mexico City, facing further resistance at battles such as Cerro Gordo and Contreras. The successful American campaign culminated in the capture of Mexico City in September 1847, leading to negotiations that resulted in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. Legacy and historical significance. The Siege of Veracruz remains a significant event in American military history, highlighting the effectiveness of combined arms operations and siege warfare during the 19th century. It underscored the role of strategic planning, naval power, and logistical support in achieving military objectives in foreign conflicts. The lessons learned from this campaign would influence American military doctrine and strategy in future conflicts. This overview provides a detailed analysis of Winfield Scott's strategies during the Siege of Veracruz. It highlights his innovative use of combined arms, meticulous planning, and effective leadership, which were instrumental in securing a decisive victory. This foundation can be expanded upon to create a comprehensive 100,000-word article, incorporating additional historical context, detailed accounts of specific actions, and further analysis of the strategic implications of Scott's decisions. The Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, was a significant conflict that reshaped the geopolitical landscape of North America. One of the pivotal moments in this war was the Siege of Veracruz, which marked the first large-scale amphibious assault in U.S. military history. This operation was crucial for the American forces as it aimed to secure a foothold in Mexico and pave the way for further advances into the Mexican interior. Mexican defensive preparations, fortifications, and defensive structures. The Mexican defenders, led by General Juan Morales, had spent considerable time and effort fortifying the city of Veracruz. The city was protected by a series of forts, walls, and redoubts, making it a formidable defensive position. Key defensive structures included Fort San Juan de Ulua, a large, well-fortified citadel located on an island near the entrance to the harbor. It served as the primary defensive stronghold and housed a significant portion of the Mexican garrison, Fort Santiago and Fort Concepcion. These forts were positioned to provide crossfire and support to the main defenses, city walls and bastions. The city itself was encircled by thick stone walls and bastions, which provided additional protection and defensive positions for the Mexican troops. Military dispositions. General Morales had approximately 3,000 troops at his disposal to defend Veracruz. These troops were distributed among the various forts and along the city walls. The Mexican defenders were well aware of the strategic importance of Veracruz and were prepared to put up a fierce resistance. Intelligence and reconnaissance. In the months leading up to the assault, the Mexican defenders had been monitoring the movements of the American forces. They were aware of the American advance and had taken steps to reinforce their defenses accordingly. However, the Mexicans were at a disadvantage due to the superior naval power of the United States, which allowed the Americans to blockade the port and prevent reinforcements and supplies from reaching Veracruz. The Siege of Veracruz. Naval bombardment. On March 9, 1847, Commodore Matthew Perry's naval squadron began a relentless bombardment of the city. The ships anchored offshore and unleashed a barrage of cannons and rockets on the Mexican defenders. This bombardment was designed to weaken the defensive structures and demoralize the Mexican troops. Amphibious landing. Following the naval bombardment, General Winfield Scott's troops initiated the amphibious landing. American soldiers waded ashore under heavy fire, their rifles and howitzers blazing. The landing was a daring operation that required precise coordination between the naval and ground forces. Ground assault. Once the American troops had secured a beachhead, they began their assault on the city's defenses. The Mexicans fought bravely, but they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. After a day of intense fighting, the American forces managed to breach the city walls and capture Veracruz. Aftermath and lessons learned. The fall of Veracruz marked a significant turning point in the Mexican-American War. The American forces demonstrated the effectiveness of combined naval and land operations, a strategy that would influence military planning for generations to come. For the Mexican defenders, the experience highlighted the importance of robust fortifications and the need for better coordination and intelligence gathering. The Siege of Veracruz was a critical moment in the Mexican-American War, showcasing the strategic and tactical preparations of both sides. While the Mexican defenders put up a valiant effort, the superior firepower and coordinated assault of the American forces ultimately led to their victory. This battle remains a significant chapter in the history of amphibious warfare and continues to provide valuable lessons for military strategists today. The Siege of Veracruz was a pivotal event in the Mexican-American War, with far-reaching implications that extended beyond the immediate military victory. This 20-day siege, which took place from March 9 to March 29, 1847, was a critical turning point that significantly altered the course of the conflict and had lasting effects on both nations involved. Strategic importance. The city of Veracruz, located on the Gulf of Mexico, was a crucial strategic target for the United States. It was the primary port through which Mexico received supplies and reinforcements, and it served as a vital link between the Mexican interior and the outside world. By capturing Veracruz, General Winfield Scott aimed to cut off Mexico's supply lines and establish a foothold from which to launch further operations into the Mexican heartland. The decision to target Veracruz was part of a broader strategy to bypass the strong Mexican defensive positions in northern Mexico and strike directly at the heart of the Mexican government. This strategy was a departure from the initial approach of advancing from the Rio Grande, which had proven to be less effective. The successful capture of Veracruz allowed Scott to march westward towards Mexico City, ultimately leading to the capture of the Mexican capital. Military significance. The Siege of Veracruz was notable for several reasons. It marked the first large-scale amphibious assault conducted by the United States military, demonstrating the effectiveness of combined arms operations. The U.S. Navy, under the command of Commodore David Conner, played a vital role in the operation, providing gunfire support and transporting troops and supplies. The use of naval artillery and the coordination between naval and land forces were critical in weakening Veracruz's defenses. The siege also showcased the importance of siege tactics and engineering. American engineers and sappers constructed artillery batteries and trenches, systematically weakening the city's defenses through sustained bombardment. The effectiveness of these tactics highlighted the role of strategic planning and logistical support in achieving military objectives. Impact on the war. The fall of Veracruz had a profound impact on the Mexican-American War. It weakened Mexican morale and contributed to growing internal divisions within Mexico over how to continue the war. The capture of the city also forced the Mexican government to divert troops from other fronts to respond to the American threat, further stretching their already strained resources. For the United States, the victory at Veracruz was a significant morale booster and demonstrated the effectiveness of their military strategy. It paved the way for further advances into Mexico, culminating in the capture of Mexico City in September 1847. The successful campaign in Mexico ultimately led to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, which ended the war and resulted in Mexico ceding vast territories to the United States. Broader historical context. The Siege of Veracruz and the Mexican-American War as a whole had lasting implications for both the United States and Mexico. For the United States, the war marked a significant expansion of its territory, doubling its size and contributing to its westward expansion. The war also influenced U.S. domestic politics, sparking debates over slavery and the future of the acquired territories. For Mexico, the loss of the war and the subsequent territorial cession had profound and lasting effects. It strained relations between the two countries for decades, contributing to perceptions of American imperialism and Mexican resentment over territorial loss. The war also highlighted the internal divisions and weaknesses within Mexico, which would continue to affect its political and social development. The Siege of Veracruz was a critical event in the Mexican-American War, with far-reaching implications for both nations. It demonstrated the effectiveness of combined arms operations and siege tactics, highlighted the importance of strategic planning and logistical support, and significantly altered the course of the conflict. The fall of Veracruz paved the way for the eventual capture of Mexico City and the end of the war, leading to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and the cession of vast Mexican territories to the United States. The siege remains a significant milestone in American military history and a pivotal moment in the broader context of the Mexican-American War. The Siege of Veracruz was a pivotal event in the Mexican-American War, lasting from March 9 to March 29, 1847. The siege was initiated by the United States Army under General Winfield Scott, with the objective of capturing the strategically important port city of Veracruz on the Gulf of Mexico. The city was heavily fortified, and its capture was crucial for the U.S. to gain a foothold in Mexican territory and advance further into the country. Food shortages and scarcity during the siege. The civilian population of Veracruz faced severe food shortages. The U.S. Navy, commanded by Commodore David Conner, blockaded the city, cutting off supply routes and preventing food and other essential goods from entering. This led to a dire situation where basic necessities like bread, potatoes, and meat became scarce, and prices skyrocketed on the black market. Civilians resorted to foraging in devastated areas and consuming whatever was available, often relying on inedible or unsafe food sources. The psychological toll of chronic hunger led to widespread malnutrition and illness among the population. Shelter and safety concerns. The relentless bombardment by American forces destroyed many homes and infrastructure within Veracruz. Civilians found themselves without shelter, and those who remained had to seek refuge in makeshift shelters such as cellars and basements, which offered minimal protection against air raids and ground assaults. Safety became a paramount issue, with civilians facing threats from sniper fire and unexploded ordnance. The constant fear and uncertainty further destabilized the community, making it difficult to maintain any semblance of normalcy. Psychological impact. The psychological impact on civilians during the siege was profound. The relentless bombings, constant gunfire, and pervasive sense of danger contributed to widespread anxiety and fear. Civilians experienced not only the trauma of immediate violence, but also the cumulative stress from witnessing the suffering and death of friends and family. Instances of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, became prevalent as citizens attempted to navigate life amid the ruins. The siege left lasting scars that continued to affect their well-being long after the conflict ended. Resilience and humanitarian efforts. Despite the dire circumstances, the civilian population of Veracruz displayed remarkable resilience. Many adapted to the hardships and maintained their humanity amidst the chaos. Efforts to help fellow citizens included organized food distributions and makeshift shelters. Civilians worked collectively, forming community groups to support those affected by the siege. These initiatives underscored the importance of solidarity and strength among the beleaguered residents. The resolve to endure and assist each other served as a beacon of hope during the siege, proving crucial for morale amidst adversity. Long-term effects on civilian life. The Siege of Veracruz left profound long-term effects on civilian life, altering the fabric of society in the region. After the siege, survivors faced widespread destruction, significantly affecting housing and infrastructure. Many families were displaced, leading to a surge in homelessness. Economically, the relentless conflict decimated Veracruz's industrial base. The collapse of local businesses caused long-lasting employment issues, which perpetuated poverty for years. The once thriving social structures were dismantled, resulting in diminished community cohesion and support networks. The Siege of Veracruz was a landmark event in the Mexican-American War that evidenced the interplay between military strategy, political ambition, and the human cost of warfare. The civilian population of Veracruz endured intense hardships, from food shortages and lack of shelter to the profound psychological impact of living under constant threat. Their resilience and collective efforts to support one another amidst the chaos highlight the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The siege serves as a reminder of the enduring legacies of conflict and the multifaceted narrative of warfare's impact on civilian life. Siege of Boston, 1775 to 1776. The Siege of Boston was the opening phase of the American Revolutionary War, lasting from April 19, 1775, to March 17, 1776. The American forces, led by George Washington, faced several key challenges during this siege. Logistical challenges. The American forces were severely lacking in supplies, including gunpowder, food, and clothing. Many soldiers were unpaid, and their enlistments were set to expire at the end of the year, leading to potential desertions. Health and disease. Smallpox was rampant among the American troops, especially those from rural communities who had not been exposed to the disease before. Washington had to set up a separate hospital to isolate the infected soldiers. Tactical limitations. The American forces were ill-equipped to conduct a traditional siege. They lacked the heavy artillery needed to bombard the British positions effectively. It was only in January 1776, when Henry Knox brought cannons from Fort Ticonderoga, that the Americans were able to fortify Dorchester Heights and threaten the British supply lines. Morale and discipline. The long duration of the siege and the harsh winter conditions tested the morale of the American troops. Washington had to constantly manage the expectations and maintain the discipline of his soldiers. World War I. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive, 1918. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive was the largest and deadliest campaign in U.S. military history up to that point, involving over 1 million American soldiers. The American forces faced significant challenges during this offensive. Terrain and fortifications. The Argonne Forest was heavily fortified with trenches, pillboxes, and barbed wire, making it difficult for American forces to advance. The dense woods and steep ravines provided natural defenses for the German troops. Artillery and gas warfare. The Germans used heavy artillery and poison gas attacks, causing significant casualties among American troops. The American forces had to adapt to these modern forms of warfare, which were unfamiliar to many of the soldiers. Logistical strain. The scale of the offensive put a significant strain on American logistics, with supplies and reinforcements often struggling to reach the front lines. The long distances and poor infrastructure in the region further complicated these efforts. Morale and experience. Many American soldiers were inexperienced and had to adapt quickly to the harsh realities of trench warfare. The high casualty rates and the grueling nature of the fighting tested the morale of the troops. World War II, D-Day and the Normandy Campaign, 1944. The Normandy Campaign, beginning with D-Day on June 6, 1944, was a critical operation for the Allies. The American forces faced numerous challenges during this campaign. Initial landings. The landings at Omaha and Utah beaches were met with severe resistance from the German forces. Mislandings and fierce opposition made it difficult for the American troops to establish a secure beachhead. Hedgerow fighting. After the initial landings, the American forces encountered the dense hedgerows of the Normandy bocage. These hedgerows provided natural fortifications for the German defenders, creating deadly killing fields for the advancing Allied troops. Logistical challenges. The scale of the operation required massive logistical support, including the transportation of troops, supplies, and equipment across the English Channel. The Allies had to establish and maintain supply lines under constant threat of German counterattacks. Morale and fatigue. The intense fighting and high casualty rates took a toll on the morale of the American troops. The slow progress and the harsh conditions of the Normandy campaign tested the resilience of the soldiers. Vietnam War. The Siege of Khe Sanh, 1968. The Siege of Khe Sanh was a significant engagement during the Vietnam War, lasting from January 21 to April 8, 1968. The American forces faced several key challenges during this siege. Guerrilla warfare. The North Vietnamese Army, NVA, and the Viet Cong employed guerrilla tactics, making it difficult for the American forces to engage in conventional warfare. The enemy was often invisible, blending into the local population and terrain and weather. The dense jungle and mountainous terrain of Khe Sanh made it difficult for American forces to maneuver and maintain effective supply lines. The rainy season further complicated operations, making the ground muddy and treacherous. Logistical strain. The remote location of Khe Sanh made it challenging to resupply the American forces. Airlifts and convoys were often targeted by the enemy, leading to significant losses and delays. Morale and public opinion. The long duration of the siege and the high casualty rates had a negative impact on the morale of the American troops. The war was also increasingly unpopular at home, with widespread protests and criticism of the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. The American forces faced a wide range of challenges during various sieges throughout history, from logistical and tactical difficulties to morale and public opinion issues. Each conflict presented unique challenges that tested the adaptability, resilience, and determination of the American soldiers. Understanding these challenges is crucial for appreciating the complexities of military operations and the evolving nature of warfare. This overview provides a glimpse into the multifaceted challenges faced by American forces during significant sieges. Each conflict had its own set of difficulties, shaped by the terrain, enemy tactics, and broader socio-political contexts. The ability to adapt and overcome these challenges has been a hallmark of the American military, though the costs have often been high in terms of human lives and resources.